In this lesson, we'll cover applying beam coping and notching. So let's actually rotate our view. And I'm just going to click the left side of the view cube. And then once I click the view cube, let's zoom in, specifically to the steel structural elements in the front of the building. Now what I really want to focus on is the vertical column where 4 beams intersect. And the beam I'm really focusing on is this beam that I'm highlighting. Notice this beam actually intersects the column. What I would like to do is cut a notch within that beam. To do that, with nothing selected, let's go to the Modify tab on the ribbon. On the Modify tab in the Geometry panel, I have a drop-down for Cope. If you click the drop-down, click Apply. Revit will then ask you to select the element that is going to be notched or cut. Choose the beam. Next, Revit asks you what will actually be doing the cutting, a column or some other framing element. Let's choose the vertical column. What happens next is a notch is cut into that beam. Now, depending on the setting, that notch may be smaller or larger in your screen than you see in mine. So how do we control that notch? Well, first of all, let's deselect everything. Click Modify in the upper left. Now, let's choose our beam. Once you have the beam selected, in the property area on the left, scroll down to where you see a value or parameter called coping distance. Yours may be set to 20. Mine was set to 10. I'm going to change mine to 20. If yours was set to 10 or 20, change it to the opposite one or another value. Then click Apply. Once you do, notice the notch either increases or decreases depending upon the actual value that you entered in. Click in the background to deselect. Now, if you would like to remove that notch, we can use the Removal tool. So make sure nothing is selected. Click Modify in the upper left. Let's go to the Modify tab. On the Modify tab, go to the Geometry panel, click the Cope drop-down, and then choose Remove Coping. Revit will again ask you to pick the piece, or in this case the beam that was notched, choose it, then it'll ask you to pick the column that did the cutting. Choose the vertical column. That notch or cope will then be removed from that structural beam. Click Modify in the upper left to deselect. So as a review, in this lesson, we looked at applying beam coping and notching. Using the tools on the Modify bar in the Geometry panel, we can apply a cope by selecting the beam, then selecting the column doing the cutting. After that, a notch is applied to the beam. To view or change that notch spacing, we first select the beam that was notched, then look for a property in the property area on the left that controls the actual cope. We can increase or decrease that value, which increases or decreases that cut area. To remove the notch, on the Modify tool, again on the Geometry panel, there's a Cope Removal tool. Selecting the beam first, then the column that did the cutting, will remove the notch from the beam.